Good afternoon to everybody and welcome to this parallel session. We would like to present to you the research started by Dr. Adriana Bambina, who is here in the audience, the mind and the art guiding this research group. She has been working on children's mental health for more than 20 years. The research started in the early 80s when she was working as a speech therapist in a public service for infant and maternal rehabilitation, while still being a psychotherapist with a psychodynamic preparation. After several years working with children who had disorders that DSM-5 defined as neurodevelopmental, she noticed that rehabilitation produced modest results, and often during the course of their development, initial symptoms were replaced by different symptoms, or in some cases, other symptoms showed up as comorbidities. Not only these, but a high percentage of these children showed different psychiatric disorders during adolescence and as adults. The medical training that she built up while living this experience led her to realize that etiopathogenesis of these disorders was only hypothesized, and therefore the possibility of having a treatment that would lead to a cure was in fact highly improbable. Moreover, in Italy, the use of psychoactive drugs become progressively more frequent in children when cognitive behavioral therapy gave limited result. Moreover, drugs, as we know, can only ease the symptoms, and they can cause at the same time heavy side effects and the risk of irreversible damaging over time a person who has yet to fully develop. The therapy, training, and research started at the end of the 70s through the collective analysis of the psychiatric Massimo Fagioli. This allowed to shift the focus of the research of the cause of children's mental disorders from the child to the parents, who often did not present any obvious psychiatric disorders. Actually, the fact that the parents did not show any obvious pathological behavior may have supported the hypothesis raised by most experts of an epigenetic transmission or of some hereditary factor. On the contrary, we were able to focus our research on the non-conscious dimensions of both parents and those children that show these disorders. From the infant research onward, we know that the relationship of children with their mothers or caregivers is essential for the healthy development. All the study on attachment and confirmed the importance of this relationship in children's development. But Massimo Fagioli's human birth theory has allowed us to deepen our research beyond the visible behavior of the parents and give us the opportunity to identify the personal dynamics acted through non-conscious images. According to the theory of the psychiatric Massimo Fagioli, birth is both healthy and equal for all human beings. And at the moment of birth, mind and body become fused together. The human mind appears at birth as a result of a reaction of the brain tissue, the retina, to the light. Up until the moment of birth, the fetus was immersed in the amniotic fluid in the darkness of the uterus. When the fetus is born, the retina is exposed for the first time to light. In reaction to the light, newborns close their eyes. They consider as non-existent the annulment poison the elements on the world that could kill them, such as the cold, but mainly the light. And at the same time, they realize a memory of their previous experience, the homeostasis of the amniotic fluid on their skin, the disappearance fantasy. In this way, the annulment pulsion is fused with the emergence of the newborn's vitality and capability to imagine. The first way of thinking is as images, a way of thinking that as adults will come back as dreams. Newborns, thanks to the vitality that emerges at birth, realize the existence of another human being that will protect them. In their relationship with another human being, newborns will have the confirmation or not of this hope. With every confirmation, their vitality will increase together with the certainty of themselves and their ability to go forward through the stages of their development. Birth can be considered as the first separation between child and their parents. Children, during the course of their growth, will have to face other moments of separations. This will challenge their vitality and the certainty they acquired, to make their current self disappear and allow for a new self to appear. This is why for children it is essential that adults recognize and accept the constant development, allowing them to grow and continue this separation. The emotion of an adult, negating or annulling the identity of a child, are invisible. They manifest themselves in pathological relational dynamics and in the symptoms of children who usually reach us with the diagnosis of neurodevelopmental disorders. We build on the fundamental discovery by Massimo Fagioli of the annulment pulsion, the most invisible and dangerous dimension, especially for children. It is a dimension that is very similar to the calmness that parents need mainly during the first year of their children's life, when they must deal with the upset event of their children's birth. This birth can throw the parents into a new and unknown reality. This may challenge their self-consciousness and their confidence in being able to take care of their children, because they must face the stress and the complexity of satisfying the continuous requests of their children for a valid relationship. The calmness from one's self-confidence, which means the calmness from one's own identity, can be confused with the calmness that allows parents to care for their children efficiently and accurately, but in spite of reducing more or less profoundly their emotional presence. The sensitivity of children toward the emotion of the adult that care for them, sensitivity that they have since their birth, is a richness in human relationships, but it can turn into vulnerability when these emotions from the parents are not adequate. The negation, non-conscious denial, is the dimension that often affects children's growth, as parents see them as less developed and autonomous, thus grown up, than what their age would allow. We will come back to this point later when discussing some clinical cases. The third dimension, called yearning, causes parents to engulf their children in a useless attempt to compensate for their own internal void. For each one of these dimensions, here schematically described, we were able to detect a prevalent correspondence between their presence and the symptoms shown by the children. From the milder and apparently transitory disorder, such as secondary neurosis and encopresis, to the more severe and persistent, such as ADHD, mood disorder, oppositional defiant conduct, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and tic and Tourette syndrome. We define them as persistent because often they continue to be present during adolescence and adulthood. The therapeutic approach we follow is a specific structured intervention. Two different psychotherapists will work, one with each parent once a week, and a third psychotherapist will sometimes, not always, work with the child. This choice depends on the three main aspects: the specific disorder affecting the child, the ability of both parents to understand the indication and interpretation provided by their psychotherapist, and on the ability of both parents to report in a precise way their children's improvement as a consequence of their own change in the relationship with the child. Some parents are more aware than others that the symptoms their children show are a consequence of their parenting behavior. We define this behavior as the expression of images, feelings, and non-conscious actions that they transmit toward the children. Some parents, on the other hand, need a different setting, as they show a stronger opposition toward accepting this new interpretation of their situation. In these cases, as a consequence, a dedicated activity with the child is needed to support them while waiting for the parents to change. Usually, children do anyway acquire an ability to learn and put into words the non-conscious images of their discomfort, thus providing the opportunity for their parents to discover a surprisingly valid aspect of their children's personality. Moreover, seeing a rapid improvement in the symptoms of their children motivates parents to continue their psychotherapy with the objective of understanding their non-conscious reality and realizing a deeper and longer lasting change in their parental relationship. A continuous exchange of information among the psychotherapists is essential to make the treatment successful. This type of setting, which we feel is a break from the norm, is clearly different from the one adopted by the systemic relational approach that requires the interaction within the same therapeutic session among all members of the family. In the recently issued PDM2, it is stated that we have luckily left behind the time in which parents were regularly blamed for the emotional and behavioral issues of their children. Based on what we stated before, we think that this exoneration could actually risk dooming them to witness almost helplessly their children suffer from disorder that can often last an entire lifetime. If, on the contrary, we help parents learn the cause of their children's symptoms and not hold them guilty for them, our clinical experience confirms that their ability of change is enhanced if properly guided through the whole process. Several studies actually related mental disorders mothers with subsequent mental issues in their children. But the parents we are referring to usually do not show any clinical evident mental disorders. Thus, the psychotherapy does not aim at changing visible behavior, as parent training does, but at transforming the internal, non-conscious images that parents experience in the relationship with their children, and to which children respond with specific symptoms that can change during the course of their development. The course of psychopathological condition, in fact, should be included in the whole framework of the growth and maturation of each single individual. The rapid resolution of children's symptoms confirm the validity of the therapeutic choice. This allows parents to discover and overcome the critical aspect of their non-conscious relationship with their children, and allows children to recover the trust they need in human relationship that, while was present at birth, then was let down. The percentage of successful cases in our clinical experience is very high, as the parents that seek our help usually already have a background experience on what they are going to face, and at least at a conscious level are ready to engage in a psychodynamic psychotherapy. Some of them already have some knowledge of the reference theory for friends or relatives that attended Massimo Fagioli's collective analysis, and some are in treatment with psychotherapists with this type of training. Our target population often seek our help because pediatricians or other psychotherapists with our same reference theory refer them to us. Sometimes, in fact, during the course of the individual or group psychotherapy of one of the parents, the disorder of their child emerges, requiring specific intervention. Parents can seek our help because they have doubt on the pharmacological treatment prescribed to their children after a diagnosis, or after a behavioral psychotherapy, or after years of logopedic or psychomotor therapy that gave no significant result. The confirmation in a longitudinal perspective of the permanent remission of all symptoms without any shift to different symptoms was obtained thanks to the possibility of keeping contact with parents or with the school, through drop-in center during the course of the children's education, or thanks to the possibility for children themselves, once reaching adolescence or young adulthood, to get in touch with us for a consultation to be more sure on how to handle in the right way some difficult moments of their life. In this type of population, the percentage of permanent remission of symptoms and a complete cure of disorder is very high. Some other time, on the other hand, the prognosis is negative as parents are discontinued the psychotherapy. This is confirmed by the fact that their children, as adults, seek our help because they show a set of symptoms which are coherent with their field diagnosis. I will lend out the word to my colleague Dr. Procaccini that will analyze a specific disorders and represent a series of clinical cases.
Thank you. So good afternoon to everyone. As my colleague said, we now are going to consider more specifically the disorder that we want to discuss today. They are developmental coordination disorders and speech sound disorders, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, tic and Tourette syndrome. Let's start with developmental coordination disorders and speech sound disorders as defined by the DSM-5. Children are diagnosed with a developmental coordination disorder when they do not reach the motor skills levels required for their age, such as buttoning up a shirt, coming downstairs, riding a bike, solving a puzzle, using scissors. It's evident from reading the DSM-5 that these children do not have any detectable organic damage, but there are only etiopathogenetic hypotheses in the so-called environmental factors. These are, in fact, unspecific factors that usually cannot even be clearly identified in the anamnesis of these children, and are, therefore, reconstructed ex post based on the observed symptoms. Actually, neonatal and pediatric checkups are currently extremely accurate. Thus, it's highly improbable that no issue is detected in any of the visits, not even in the neurological ones. However, most of the authors find the confirmation of the genetic basis of these disorders in the significantly higher prevalence in males, ranging from 2:1 proportion to a 7:1 proportion, as stated by the DSM-5. The genetic etiological hypothesis is based only on this statistical evidence, which is present with varying percentages in all neurodevelopmental disorders. Unfortunately, nobody seems to take into account this simple observation. Every male child is obviously born to a female mother, the person who is most involved in the first years of children's life, when they are more vulnerable. As the relationship is with another human being, it's clearly a male-female relationship. Non-conscious dynamics affecting the boy's growth are much easier to develop. Instead of considering as certain the genetic etiology, which has, however, yet to be confirmed, experts should consider the importance of this element that distinguishes a boy from a girl. However, it's a long time that psychopathological hypotheses are banned as being non-scientific. In our clinical experience, on the other hand, we were able to observe that unknowingly in the relationship with a male child, mothers can develop negations and annulment specifically against his gender identity. And now we go back to consider pediatric dyspraxia. or developmental coordination disorder, to underline that children with dyspraxia appear as younger than their age, but obviously not in their physical appearance, that is fully normal. This definition of kids appearing younger than their age may seem too concise and imprecise, but it's aimed at shifting the attention of the clinician on the cause of this apparent stop in the development of motor skills. We must underline that physical development, weight and height, and motor development, walking and gross motor skills of the first year of life are not affected in normal condition by the relationship with parents, while the acquisition of fine motor skills can be heavily influenced by the family environment. We underline, however, that the family of the children we treat do not show any evident anomalies in their behaviors, and it's exactly for this reason that usually the disorder is identified in the child and not in the relationship between the child and the significant adult. It might be not superfluous to highlight that standing position, opposing thumbs, and motor skills, as long as language and the ability to write, are biological characteristics typical to human beings. Therefore, children living naturally with other human beings will spontaneously acquire these abilities without them being taught by their mothers. It's also easy to observe that all children want to grow up in order to be able to do all those things that adults know and can do. It's interesting to note that children start at a very young age to prefer playing with real objects, such as keys, glasses, phones, and not with its toy versions. This is because children desire to be able to live as soon as possible the lives of the adult that they admire and love. On the other hand, the type of relationships that make children clumsy or dyspraxic are those that severely slow down their normal drive to grow. It must be underlined that for children, being able to button a shirt, to tie their shoes, means to grow up and become a bigger boy or girl. While children with this type of disorder seem not to be able, or better, not want to realize this normal development. Actually, we can say that they are not allowed to grow up and to acquire their own autonomy, and thus they accept an internal image less developed as they are afraid of losing their parents' love. We can imagine that they think, if they love me as a small child, how can they love me if I grow up? However, our clinical experience allows us to state that the dysfunctional relationships that cause in children these slowdowns in the development of motor coordination can be cured in an easier and faster way when compared to other disorders. The mothers, in fact, in most of the cases, do not show severe psychological disorders. These mothers are often able to give up the image they have of their children as small, once they are led to understand the damage that they are non-consciously inflicting on their children. And now we see speech sound disorder. Children with a speech sound disorder continue to use immature processes of phonological simplification, even if they are beyond the age in which the majority of children are able to clearly produce words. When discussing each disorder, the DSM-5 repeats that the organic etiology can only be hypothesized, as, by definition, medical or neurological causes and sensorial deficit are to be excluded. The neuropsychological tests administered to children during the diagnostic process are clearly not as objective as laboratory or instrumental tests, whose results are independent from the cooperation of the examined subject. When testing children's abilities instead, we can only assess what they show us with their behavior, and not what they are actually capable of doing. Children's clinical experience leads us to think that children exposed to a normal linguistic environment will be anyway able to learn a language to a level at least sufficient for a typical daily conversation. But they are not able or don't want to be fully aware of the level of development they reached. They don't want to show it to their parents or to other adults. One of the reasons of this behavior is that the development of linguistic abilities for kids is the realization and the proof of their development and growth. For children, speaking correctly means growing up and becoming more autonomous from their parents. However, parents don't always experience positively the growth and the new autonomy of their children. On the contrary, some of them experience exactly the opposite, and they easily admit that they are more able to feel and show affection, love, and warmth when their children are less grown up. Children require an enormous but physiological amount of work to acquire language in terms of elaboration of the language of the environment in which they are immersed. Therefore, they could happen not to be motivated to confront this challenge and thus not use all the resources their intelligence provides them. This could cause an actual temporary slowdown in the phonological abilities, even though our clinical experience doesn't confirm this. However, this potential slowdown is only temporary, and it happens when this advancement in linguistic ability doesn't come together with an increase in consideration, recognition, and affection by their parents. To better explain this concept, this happens when parents are only able to maintain an adequate level of affection towards their children by negating their growth. Some parents, in fact, often easily admit not having corrected some dyslalic words in their children as if these children were younger, exactly because these small errors elicited in them a feeling of affection and protection. We will better explain this concept through a specific clinical case. What children with a neurodevelopmental disorder show us, and thus what determines the diagnosis, is only what they can show us while experiencing a troubled family relationship, which is very often hard to identify. Therefore, our therapeutic intervention, as stated before, aims at curing those relationships that determine the disease, with the objective of removing what we can define as the pathogen that causes the alteration in the behavior of the child. As a consequence, we don't rehabilitate nor habilitate children. Those abilities were never acquired, which means that we don't teach children with a disorder what they were not able to learn by themselves. What we do is we remove what prevents them from having a normal development. We can thus learn that no mental structure or function of these children was disrupted, but all was just an alteration of the normal expression of a specific ability. What disappeared can also reappear. And now we are going to see a clinical case, DCD and SSD. Tommaso is 5 years old and has a diagnosis of dyspraxia and dyslalia. Tommaso kept on replacing the vowel O with the vowel A. Thus, a trophy won in a competition turned into a trophy, and the nose turned into a naze. His language was unintelligible, and he seemed to be unable to solve a puzzle meant for 3-year-old children. His mother's psychotherapy is focused on her negating the development of this son and treating him as if he was much younger than his actual age. Acting like this, she was trying to compensate for the time she had spent with the older son, who now recovered from several surgeries. After almost 2 months of treatment, the therapist begged Tommaso to speak properly. It was a turning point during the therapeutic process. Tommaso asks her to close the door, so his parents couldn't hear him from the other room. And suddenly, he starts speaking properly. As I said, it was a turning point during the therapeutic process, as it was the one that follows. A few days later, he had to correctly place some shapes in the corresponding slots in a wooden tablet. He quickly and correctly places the first 10 shapes, which are the most difficult, as there are much more available options, and then slow down, proceeding by trial and error, until the therapist ironically states that it was really weird that he was not able to complete the task now that it was so much easier. At this point, he laughs out, turns like this towards the therapist, looking at her with a smart and cunning smile, and without any hesitation, swiftly places the remaining shapes. This case gives us the opportunity to discuss how we question the concept of comorbidity. Comorbidity is defined as the concomitant presence in one single subject of different conditions, each due to a different cause. We do believe, instead, that in such a case, a common etiology can be identified. That is, the mother negating the normal development of her child, thus causing both the CDC and SSD. We would rather define these disorders, in which no organic cause can be identified, as slowdowns and not as delays, as these children can completely recover the slowdown, which is functional and most of all reversible. As an example, to better understand the essential difference between a diagnosis of delay and a diagnosis of slowdown, these children behave as a train that has to slow down for a short time due to an impediment on the line. Let's say some rocks fell on the rails, but then once the obstacle is removed, the train can start back, recover all the time it had lost, and still make it in time as the engine did not have any damage. This slowdown, therefore, can affect different skills depending on the developmental phase in which it appears, such as fine motor skills and or different language skills, or later on in first grade, writing skills. Our work must therefore be aimed at identifying this obstacle, who was responsible for it and why. The next case we are going to see is attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. According to the DSM-5, the three main characteristics associated with the diagnosis of ADHD are impulsivity, inattention, and hyperactivity. We will now try to explain what a child who behaves as described in all the essays on ADHD feels and experiences. Every child experiences the physiological need for human relationships, which are as essential for him/her exactly as warmth and food. And this is what a newborn child experiences at the moment of birth, which is the capability to imagine the existence of another human being that is able to reciprocate his/her desire according to the human build theory, as we stated earlier. Children, therefore, need to be perceived and seen by their parents, and thus understood and protected, not only from material dangers, but mainly from more or less latently aggressive human relationships. We now know that children have, since their birth, an extraordinary sensitivity that also makes them much more vulnerable to invisible aggressions. And children that show some sort of distress are probably those in which that sensitivity is even deeper. We define as aggression not some evident material behavior, but the invisible viruses known as annulment, pulsion, and negation. Annulment, pulsion, and negation that wear down children's vitality, weaken their still fragile identity, and damage the image of coherence and wisdom that they have of adulthood, thus undermining their relationship with adults in general. Children showing symptoms of this disorder experience a constant feeling of anxiety. They move constantly, are unable to focus and carry out an activity for the time required for its completion. They are restless, as if they were the only one perceiving an imminent, invisible, but serious danger, and thus they move around anxiously and aimlessly. We can think that this is their way of reacting to these situations that they feel as threatening and overpowering, as they perceive themselves as helpless spectators with an annulment pulsion against frustrating and disheartening human relationships. When experiencing a moment of mental void, of absence of relationship with another human being or with the task they are presented with, we can think that they feel as non-existent, as if they disappear, and thus they need all the hyperactivity to feel as present, or better, non-absent. It seems that the inevitable and even stronger reprimands and pleas to behave in an appropriate way do stop their frantic activity for a short time, but they shortly after start again to behave relentlessly. based on our theoretical framework and clinical experience, we believe we can confidently state that these children are scared of being invisible. And for this reason, they constantly do whatever is in their power to be seen by everyone, but mainly by themselves. They act, as a matter of fact, as bad children, because they believe that they are bad, as they make disappear who they perceive as frustrating and disheartening, when they are in fact making themselves disappear what they feel towards who they love the most and who they have to rely on for their life. We can say that their mothers are not exactly privy of emotion, but they alternate unemotional reactions with moments of emotional presence. And now we're going to see a clinical case of ADHD. Mario. Mario is 6-year-old with a diagnosis of ADHD, was in treatment with Ritalin for a couple of months, but side effects were overwhelming: sleepiness, apathy, inappetence. His mother seeks our help, and we start psychotherapy, while gradually tapering Mario's pharmacological treatment until discontinuation. Both the mother and her child went through a judicial separation from the child's father, who had not met his son in months. We start working on the mother and her annulment passion against the rage she feels also toward her child, who still has hope in a relationship with his father. Father that, when calling, keeps on promising visits that he never actually makes. The mother suffered and was angry, but tried not to show these feelings by turning into a stone. Mario said, "You turn into a stone." Now, this doesn't happen anymore. She learned how to separate from these upsetting feelings, and Mario became more calm and cooperative. It's possible that the woman's repeated unemotional reactions started before Mario's birth, and it's probable that during her childhood and adolescence she reacted protecting herself with an annulment pulsion to feelings that she deemed, and she was probably right, as too destructive towards the persons she depended on. And now we're going to see our last clinical case, that is tic and Tourette syndrome. According to the European guidelines, tics are sudden, rapid, recurrent, non-rhythmic movements or sounds that usually manifest in bouts and have no constant trend in terms of frequency, intensity, and type of tic. Typically, their onset in children is at 5 to 6 years of age. Tourette syndrome includes the combination of chronic motor and sound tics. We believe that Tourette syndrome or tic disorder, based on our clinical experience, are the expression of kids failing to attempt to control their deep rage toward their parents that try to cage them in an educational scheme that is way too strict for their original and lively personalities. It's also true that very often the strictness of these parents shows an actual, more deep insecurity, an immature personality that is unable to overcome their identification with their own parents. This condition can often determine in these parents an obsessive type personality, even if sometimes the rituals are only slightly present. This doesn't mean that the disorder in children is due to a familiarity that is a genetic inheritance, but it's instead due to a relationship acted by their parents in an obsessive way. These children feel that something is strange, distorted in the apparently normal ways their parents act towards them, but they annul their rage and try anyway to obey. The mental images of their humiliation and hatred towards their parents do suddenly emerge, and they get to make them disappear more effectively with the help of a gesture and then a sound. If the obsessive structure of the responsible parents is not too heavy, they will be able in a short time, through the psychotherapy and supported by the love for their children, to stop transferring their own rituals in their kids, sometimes delegating to the other parent the activities in which the rituals are more focused, such as the next case. Last case. Leah. Leah is 7 years old, and the pediatrician sent her to us due to a persistent cough. The girl asks the therapist if she can talk to her in private and says that the father dressed her up because he wants me to always make a good impression. And then she asks, why when I blink my eyes I feel more calm? Leah's mother confirms, saying that her husband takes care of Leah's appearance in an excessive way, even changing her clothes several times during the same day. Both parents started psychotherapy separately, and after some time the father started allowing Leah to dress for herself, and the mother stopped giving up her role in the family due to her lack of self-consciousness. All symptoms disappear in a short time. And now let's draw some conclusions and see how this can change our future perspective. For this disorder, the last one, I mean, and for all the other disorders treated in this paper, we do not assume that we have identified in an absolute way the etiology of this severe syndrome, but based on a limited series of solved and healed cases, we identified the common elements that we believe are the cause of the disorder. We thus modified these pathological aspects in the relationship, and witnessed a complete remission of all symptoms, even several years after the treatment. We believe that this could be a new way of thinking children's mental health that widens the research in this field, focusing the research on human relationships, treating the annulment pulsion, negation, and yearning instead of the hypothesized organic causes, could lead to new possibilities of curing mental disorders in these little patients and their families. Thank you. We have plenty of time for questions if you have.
Is it not true that parents often will react as if they are blamed?
I didn't hear.
Oh, won't it be? Is it not true that parents will often feel blamed for the problems of their children? Or how do you deal with that?
Ok.
ma è causa, e quindi ricordati che poi se non c'è la causa, i bambini e poi i più grandi rimangono con problemi gravi.
Yes, this is what you said is true. Normally what we do is that we clearly said to the parents that they are not guilty, that they are the cause of this disorder in the children. And being the cause means the possibility to be the factor that can resolve the problem. They become, instead of being the psychological reason for the disorder of the children, they become the resolution for the disorder of the children. That's what we said normally to these parents. Therapeutic factor. They become a therapeutic factor for the mental health resolution of their children. Yeah, that's normal that happen. That parents ask.
Are you working on the basis of what the parents are telling you, or on observations? So how do you work in psychotherapy with the parents?
Ci chiede come lavoriamo nella terapia con i genitori, sulla base di quello che ci dicono, o come osservando sulla base di quello che ci dicono.
Cioè ci dicono, ci sono anche i sogni
E la patologia del bambino.
e cosa fa il bambino, cioè, no?
Sì.
Loro parlano al bambino, il bambino si arrabbia,
Sì.
il bambino è calmo, allora io capisco se hanno parlato bene.
Okay, sorry, but of course I have to confront with her because she is our leader. So, okay, so normally what we do is the parents report us dreams, what the children does, what the children do, how the children react to some words, to some behavior that they have, and on that, based on that images that they come to us, we work with parents, because it's important, your question. Normally we work with parents and not with children, and we work based on what we report to us regarding what the children do, or think, or react, etc.
No, I hear you talk a lot about parents.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, in the presentation, it's often mother-child relationship. And I'm wondering, is it not, does the father or the other parent not outbalance the relationship? Are they both influencing the child in a bad way, or is it just one parent, and can the other parent outbalance it? And that's something I miss in this story.
Ok, dice che noi nella relazione abbiamo parlato molto di madre e adesso parliamo di parents. Allora dice, mi manca un pezzo, cioè quale dei genitori porta il problema e se l'altro genitore in qualche maniera può sopperire.
Ok, sì, certo. Allora, a te. A te, sì. Cioè, perché abbiamo parlato. Ma loro non capiscono.
Però tanto se meno registriamo.
Ah, così si sente la scusa. Allora, abbiamo parlato per i due disturbi, quello della motricità e del linguaggio, hai ragione, cioè i primi due disturbi sono dei bambini più piccoli e lì la negazione della mamma è molto importante. Poi invece l'altro disturbo, che è Tourette, è tutti e due i genitori possono determinare questo problema. Alla fine, no? Per non dire solo la madre, solo il padre, abbiamo detto, no? Genitori, ma aggiungi che è molto importante che il genitore che sta meglio possa in qualche modo sostituire l'altro genitore per un periodo.
Okay, so that's true what you said. We spoke mainly on mothers in the first two disorders because the children were little, small children, smaller than the 7-year-old Leah for the Tourette one, where both of the parents were involved. But there is one main aspect that you actually understood quite right, that is often when it's one parent that is acting this annulment pulsion against the child, we work mainly with the other parent that can substitute the parents doing that in some behavioral stuff, as happened, for example, with Leah, because the parents that was obsessed, that was the father, was substituted by the mother. Okay. Was I clear?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the frequency. Yes.
Once a week.
Once a week.
Once a week. And when we work with mother and father, once for the mother and once for the father. Once a week.
And how do you assess these annulments?
How do you assess?
How do you assess them? So you talk with your mother,
Uh-huh.
and she tells
Same.
things,
Same.
dreams, and how do you assess or point to the annulments?
To the?
The annulment, the annulling.
I understand. Okay.
Or the negation.
Ok.
You say now you do it, or something like that.
Ok, è una buonissima domanda. Dice, tu parli con la madre o col padre, come fai a capire, a beccare l'annullamento e che cosa gli dici dopo? Poche parole.
Sì, è una formazione di sensibilità, come una volta il medico, no, capiva da come era messo il paziente. È una sensibilità che però richiede conferma dopo un'ipotesi e poi confermi, cioè con i successivi. Il bambino sta meglio se hai beccato il punto.
Okay, that was a really good question. So, it's a sensitivity. It's she's a doctor, no? She's a medical, and she said it's when the doctor in the past could understand something looking at the patient. She could feel, for example, that something when the head was like this, and then it's almost 30 or 40 years that we have this human birth theory by Massimo Fagioli, so it's a training that she had. And then you make an hypothesis. You say, this is your annulment behavior, but then you have to ask, you have to see if you were correct. And you can see that by the behavior of the children. Because if the child changes, and sometimes it happened in 2 times that she saw the mother or the father, so it was right. You were right in understanding the annulment pulsion, and that's very important. Of course, the child has to change. You have to see an improvement.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.